The first thing I want to do is take attendance. And so I will just say, if you could indicate by saying aye that you're here. Troy?
Here.
Rich?
Here.
I'm here. Gabriella?
Here.
Jason, I see you. Here. And Mike Gurnetsky.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so there are 6 of us. We have 1 vacancy. The 7th position is vacant. We do have a quorum. I want to ask, is Andrew on?
Andrew is not on.
No. Maybe we'll wait a second for Andrew. But while we're waiting, who is the minute taker for these meetings?
Staff.
Yeah, I think
Staff.
I think Andrew typically takes the minutes.
Andrew takes the minutes?
Yeah, usually staff is responsible for that for the commissions.
So I'm not getting a clear message. Is there somebody else besides Andrew that would take minutes?
Andrew is registered.
Andrew, speak.
All I have to do is copy-paste my
Registered, but he is not on the requirement.
since the president's already.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also believe staff can go take minutes after this by watching the recording.
Oh, that's good thought. That was Mike. But I do want Mike to be here or Andrew to be here for the meeting. Does anybody know why he would not be getting on soon?
Did not see an email, but
Something must have come up.
Could be in the car.
Hey, Bill, while we're waiting, do you mind if I just make a small comment?
Yes.
So I've been appointed to the Madison Beltline Planning and Environmental Linkages Policy Advisory Committee.
Appointed to what?
And let me go again. It's very long. It's called the Madison Beltline Planning and Environmental Linkages Policy Advisory Committee. So it's part of that regional transportation plan. It's looking specifically at Beltline congestion and how to alleviate it. It's been in the works since 2012, I think, but they're kind of re-upping the committee. And it has participants from all of the Madison and then all of the surrounding towns and municipalities and also advocacy groups that have a stake in it. So we had an initial meeting. I know that Bill Balke and Andrew McFadden are also part of the technical advisory committee portion of that project. So anyway, I participated in the first one. There's going to be public meetings that I can let the committee know about in the hope that you'll participate. And I thought that maybe at some point, perhaps Andrew and we should have an agenda item where we talk about what's happening and maybe we can gather some feedback in a committee meeting while it's happening. Because there's all sorts of ideas like park and rides, like how to update bicycle and pedestrian components, and then also like actual Beltline components like the flex lane, adding a lane. There's all sorts of different ideas that are being considered. So just wanted to give you an update that I'm on that commission, happy to answer any questions, and I can share information as it comes up.
Let's come back to that. During announcements at the end of this agenda, I was going to mention that regional transportation plan, and that would be a time you could come back to this thought, and we could talk about future agenda items related to it.
Sounds good.
So with that said, and knowing that we have 6 commission members on a quorum, I just want to look at the agenda, review the agenda with you, and get your approval. This isn't an agenda item, but it should be an agenda item to approve the agenda. So I just want to point out a couple minor things that I'm going to do slightly differently from what is written here. One is after a call for public appearances for non-agenda items, I was going to ask Andrew to reflect or comment or explain the concerns that Mike Zimmerman raised, and that we have, I think, all received in the form of an email. So that was going to be the next up item. Following that, there's approval of minutes. We have some review items. One is to review the or to talk about responsibilities and procedures of our commission, and particularly we can discuss the language that's in the Fitchburg Code of Ordinances and in the member handbook about what our purpose is and what we're up to. And one reason to raise that point, that I wanted to raise that, is it pertains to Troy's item, and it gives us a little perspective to talk about Troy's suggestion. So that's the first item under review items. Then we're going to talk about identification of bike and pedestrian priority crossing locations, and that's something that Andrew is just going to have to do for us. We're going to have to, item C is upcoming wayfinding sign, RFQ, and not sure I really know what that means, but again, that's a job for Andrew to explain what that's about. And then, the only really substantive item on the agenda is Troy's proposal, which we will discuss, and Troy, I assume, will move adoption of it or approval of it. And if that's seconded, we'll have a discussion and we can amend it and do whatever we want with it, including approve it or not. But what we do there, it really, Mike Zimmerman has raised some concerns about, I think, about what we can and should do. And so I really wanted to have Andrew here to talk about that. Anyway, following that agenda item, we'll have announcements and adjournment. So are there any concerns about this agenda, and can somebody move approval of this agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the agenda? Okay, I'll assume unanimous consent to approve the agenda. Thank you. And at this, is there anybody online, I should ask, any members of the public that wants to talk about a non-agenda item?
No, sir, there are none.
There are none. Thank you. So at this point, I had thought, or I had hoped, that Andrew would be talking about Mike Zimmerman's memo. I will attempt, at least to very briefly summarize what I think is the gist of it, or the concerns that I understand. One has to do with that we not overreach our authority, in terms that we not contradict city policy and think that will take effect just because we want it to. And the other, I think he had a concern about not about it discussing items, agenda items through email, and there's an issue about rolling quorums and not addressing issues in a acceptable public manner. And so those are two general concerns. Until Andrew gets here, I'm not sure what to do, except I think we'll just move ahead. But let me ask, did anybody else have comments or reflections on the Zimmerman memo?
I guess I do. So I've been on the committee for 1 year, and I think for me, confusion came in was that when I joined the committee, there was really nothing given to me about the scope of what this committee does and handles.
Yep.
And then I think the former chair gave me the state statute, and the state statute just said that you must have a committee to handle transit issues, busing, mass transit.
Yeah.
So, at first I was wondering if it was even the scope of this committee to discuss roads and,
Yeah.
designs of roads. Well, under city ordinance, the city ordinance did grant that authority. So I would guess that it would probably should be Zimmerman to come and talk about, what's already in city ordinance. I think probably what we're looking for is already in city ordinance about how you handle a meeting, what's the scope of the transit commission, and it's probably unnecessary. And after reading the email from Zimmerman, it's probably unnecessary to have the stuff that Troy suggested. It's probably already in there. But that's just for me, coming as, a relative newcomer.
Okay. Well, sorry, was there another comment?
Yeah, Bill, this is Troy. I wrote down some notes for just the state statute and the Fitchburg ordinances. So I'll read them off so I get it right. The Fitchburg ordinances state that the TTC is in the driver's seat when it comes to transportation and transit policies in Fitchburg, with policies adopted by the TTC subject to approval or not by the Common Council. The TTC is operationally drifted into simply being responsive to agenda items so placed by the staff in responding to Common Council referrals. I think that the TTC, through the commission chair, with the assistance of staff, needs to assume leadership in its areas, which has been given lead role responsibilities, and work with the staff to establish a predictable schedule of periodic policy reviews.
Okay, all right.
Especially those on a schedule established by ordinance, by state laws, regulations, and contracts, especially the transit contracts. These scheduled policy reviews need to be placed, I think, preferably on a well-maintained web page as a heads up to the TTC, the common mayor, the staff, the public, everybody. I think there's also an importance of timely communications on the interactions between the staff and other governmental units like Metro. And I think we need to be included ongoing into the deliberations, the back and forth there, because we tend to get, a presentation by Metro and then we got a done deal. So I think by doing a little bit more on the beginning, we can eliminate some of our wondering questions when we're presented the final product. So the last thing I want to point out is Ordinance 6.381 states that all new development plans shall be reviewed by the TTC. So I think we need to work out maybe with our Public Works member, maybe some way to be appraised of all the developments that they get, or whoever is the most applicable city commission that gets that information, so we can be updated. I don't think we have to get all the stuff that Public Works get, but it'd be nice to know what the developments are, where they are in work, ones that are planned, whatever is said to the Public Works in the public session. I would like to place a burden on our Public Works member to give us a report at each TTC meeting as to what those development plans are that might affect transit especially, and transportation in general.
Okay, and I think we may come back to those thoughts. At this point, I just wanted to get reactions to Mike Zimmerman's memo and interpretations of it.
Okay.
Because we're going to move on and look at our code of ordinance a little bit.
I did some research on one of the issues he raised about email meetings, and I looked up the guide from the Department of Justice. They have a guide published in 2019, and in that, under electronic communications, they say, written communications transmitted by electronic means, such as email, instant messaging, blogging, or other social media, may constitute a convening of the members depending on how the communication medium is used. So I think when somebody like myself pushes out an update, I think my reading of it is it's not appropriate for people to say, I'll vote for the motion, or I'm going to second it, or all that type of stuff, because then you're responding to me in a type of dialogue, especially if it's copied to everybody else. So I think it's because of this electronic stuff, how I couldn't figure out how else to push out my updated, revision. But I think we have to be careful not to respond when someone, especially the chair or, the engineer or even sometimes our council member pushes out information. I don't think it's necessarily for us to appropriate directly in email. We should do those responses in person in public session as a kind of a going forward guideline.
Okay, I'm not, when you're speaking, you have a little speaker right in front of you. If you could really talk at that, or maybe just turn it a little bit. 'Cause
Okay. Oop.
I lost you a little bit
I'm
as you were
sorry,
talking.
I,
You have to keep, you're
There we
looking
go.
away, but you have to sort of keep looking at that thing and talking to it, or otherwise,
okay, I
don't
pretend it's a
follow
lollipop but not touch, right?
So at this point, I'd like to turn to, well, first I'd like to look at item 3, approval of minutes. I think we have to approve the last session meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the May 13th, 2021 meeting minutes.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed? None opposed, so those meeting minutes are approved. Now I want to look at review item A, the purpose, responsibilities, and procedures of this commission. And in particular, to look at the code, this language in the Code of Ordinances, if we should want to, and the member handbook. Let me, I may need to apologize to some of you about my emailing ability, and particularly Jason, I'm not sure if you got everything, because I realized I was sending email to you at Hogmail instead of Hotmail, and so some of it came back, but it didn't come back right away. So I got one today even that said that you hadn't reached this message that's going to Hogmail. So let me just ask, have any, I know all of you got the language from the Code of Ordinances, it was in the packet. But I'm not sure that you all got the member handbook that I tried to circulate around.
I got it.
I received it too.
In particular, Jason, did you get?
no, I did not get it.
Okay, so you'll be flying blind. I can put it up if needed to look at things in it, but there is a member handbook. In fact, I'm going to attempt to show you what it looks like.
Bill, I tried to find it on the city webpage. Could you publish that in our minutes?
I can send it around to everybody again.
No, I'm just saying for reference because I couldn't find it on the webpage to see if there was a latest edition or something like that.
And I don't know if I can do this. Am I sharing with you? Can you see that on your screen? No, sir. Well, then I don't know enough about this. Share. Well, let me try this. Can you see that on your screen?
Yep.
Excellent. Oh, by God, I did it. This is what the member handbook looks like. The latest edition, which is in the Fitchburg webpage, is in November 2020. It's about 16 or 18 pages long, I think. There's a lot in there that's relevant, I think, to what Troy was, the issues he was addressing in his email or in his proposal. So, for example, there's a discussion of rules of order, procedure. There's discussion of our deadlines when we have to do things, the frequency of our meetings. And there is, by the way, also a specification that we should have a vice chair. And so, anyway, this is a highly relevant document to what we're trying to talk about. I really wanted to just put it out for comment and for people to look at it, but Jason, I apologize because I didn't get a copy to you, but I assume other people have had a chance to look at this. So I won't try to do that. But I do want to turn to the Code of Ordinances language that we have. And the things I thought worth mentioning in that were that if you look at section 6.380, powers and responsibilities, It is all about mass transit and planning. But it also says we will address other transportation concerns as the council may deem necessary. And it says that we will integrate city mass transit plans with county, state, federal, and other local transit plans, which could include this Greater Madison Regional Transit Planning effort, which we're gonna, I think Gabrielle is gonna mention in a while. Another thing I wanted to point out about the Code of Ordinances is that there's a section 6.384 procedures that says the Transportation and Transit Commission may adopt policies, rules, and procedures governing its meetings and activities as it deems necessary and appropriate to fulfill its duties and responsibilities. So the reason I mention that is that at least a significant part of what Troy's doing falls under that heading, is authorized and approved under that heading. So are there any other comments right now about either of those documents? No. All right, we have a couple other items under review items. One is identification of the bike and pedestrian priority crossing locations, but Andrew's not here to help us with that.
Bill, you asked about the next item. RFQ stands request for quotation.
Yeah, that's the next one. Do you have information about that?
Request for quotation. So
Oh,
just
okay. That's what that means, request for qualifications?
Bid.
Quoted.
quotation. That usually means that you have a pretty good idea what you want, and you're throwing it out there so that whoever may be interested may express their interest to the city
Okay,
by, doing the actual quote.
okay. Well, we do have some limited information in our packet that I guess pertains to these things. To be honest, it's a little cryptic to me and hard to appreciate what that is about, and Andrew's not here to tell us more. So unless there's an objection, I think we'll move on past those information items and take up agenda item 5A, which is Troy's proposal. And so at that point, Troy, I would ask you to introduce your proposal briefly, and then I'll look for somebody to move approval of it. And if that's not forthcoming, we'll just move on to announcements.
Quick caveat, do we need to approve, make a motion to approve first and then go into discussion?
First, somebody needs to move approval, somebody needs to second it, and then we have a discussion.
Okay, thank you.
So is yours a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Well, I'll second just so I can table it later, I
Troy's
guess.
gonna second his own motion. That's fine. So it's made and seconded. We can move on to discussion now. Troy, why don't you describe for us what you're after here?
Okay, before, this was, I'd like to bring up to the members that there's bylaws by the Fitchburg Public Library of Trustees, which I wasn't aware of. And that's a complete set of rules that governs the Public Library Board, which I think is a holdover for when they were a semi-autonomous nonprofit entity. So a lot of I intend at the end to make a motion to table my motion to the future, and I'll explain that why. But on my original motion, I'll do an explanation. This motion, or more properly, its proposed substitute, is a starter set of rules observing on what works and doesn't work at the Fitchburg Council Committee and Fitchburg Commission meetings, as well as other organizations that I belong to. So like all rules, these rules are not permanent and binding on anybody, including ourselves. We can at any time, if we want to, suspend any or part of the rules. So like the rule I propose on colloquies, we can just by unanimous consent or voice vote, if somebody really wants to, waive that rule. So, and, you know, the next meeting, we can have a whole new set of rules if we wanted to, so to speak. So it's just a standard set of parliamentary rules that you can't do anything binding on any future meeting of that body. So I think that's important to realize. This is not concrete. So a lot of the other information I did was before I found this Public Library Board of Trustees, so I'll skip those comments. But I am going to propose, I think I'd like to propose having a standing parliamentarian. And
I'm sorry, having what?
a parliamentarian appointed by the chair. And my strong suggestion would be that be the most senior person who's probably got the most experience with the TTC. And that's obviously going to change over time, but that's a way for the most experienced person in the TTC to add knowledge to the other members who haven't been there as long. So I think that's an ideal role for the person who's not either the chair or a deputy chair, which I'm also going to propose. It would be to have a parliamentarian who can help the chair on challenges and look things up without distracting the chair from chairing the meeting, and to do other things too that might be useful. So what I'm, once I've done, after we're through the discussion and get more ideas, I'll be interested in doing a table to motion because I'd like to talk, I'd like to consider a revision of what I've proposed with the Public Library Board of Trustees set of rules as a model.
Okay, and I would, so you're saying you're gonna move to table your own motion?
That's correct.
Once we've heard any discussion or thoughts people have about it.
Well, this is Rich, can we discuss it a little bit? So what I'd like to see is in the next packet, everything that we want to move or make a motion on is included in the packet. The public can see it, everything's out there for everybody. So if we can maybe today discuss what we want to see in there without making a definite, and then somebody or Troy can put together the document and that could be published with our packet. Does that make sense?
Okay, just to, I'll mention, once the motion, I'm trying to, in this member handbook, there is a convenient table of what are called ranking motions, different kinds of motions that can be made. One is to table an item. But once we table it, it won't necessarily come back of its own volition. It has to be reintroduced in a future agenda. Maybe that's what Rich was just saying, and spelled out therein. So anyway, there are other comments right now about Troy's ideas.
Well, if I can keep going, I like the idea of a vice chair. I think that something that we usually have in other commissions and is needed. I don't know about the parliamentarian thing, whether that is, we sort of are our own traffic cops here to make sure that we stay on topic and that we
Yes,
stay.
thank you.
Pardon me?
I like the idea of a deputy chair. I do think we need a parliamentarian, just for the reasons Troy mentioned, having a senior member who's been on, who knows how the meetings and motions should be made, would be helpful.
All right, let me say, the member handbook calls for us to have a vice chair. And my intention, my thought was to put that on the agenda for the next meeting, to have an election of a vice chair at the next meeting. I think it should be posted in the agenda, in an agenda, so people know we're gonna do that, and then we should do that next time. So, but that doesn't require us to do anything else except to do it. We just have to elect a vice chair. It doesn't require any amendment or new language or anything. Other thoughts, but if we
So-
want, if we want to have a parliamentarian, we could have a motion to do that too.
So
at
I,
the next
pull,
meeting.
I pulled up the ordinances, and this is something that I think everyone in the committees really should have a link to the Fitchburg ordinances, because it has a pretty good search engine, and you can just search it for keywords, and I didn't have it for a while until the city lawyer sent it to me. I feel like so I can send you a link to where you find the city ordinances so you can do your own research. There is a whole section on Transmission Transit Committee, so I'll do that afterward.
That's in the packet, Gabrielle, the section about the TTC that's in the Code of Ordinances is in your packet.
Oh, yep. Yeah, but I think it's useful to have the link to the actual full database of the ordinances, because you can reference
Yeah.
all of the different city ordinances.
I have a link to the state statutes, and
Yeah.
it's surprising. They even have the ability there to search all the versions of the state statutes back to the Civil War type of
That's
thing.
so cool.
And that's very useful to find out when something changed. So,
So our city attorney did mention that, and it says it in the ordinances, the Transportation Transit Commission may adopt such policies, rules, and procedures governing its meetings and activities as it deems necessary and appropriate to fulfill its duties and responsibilities. So I think as long as we notice it, it's in the packet, and any sort of proposed rule changes, I think that would be great. In regards to a parliamentarian, I think that for me, this comes down to a couple meetings ago when we didn't know how to make the motions and how to vote on the amended motions. There was some confusion about how to work through parliamentary procedure. So I think that a parliamentarian is an interesting idea. The only thing about it is that I think that person really needs some sort of actual training in parliamentary procedure to be truly serving as a parliamentarian. And I don't necessarily think seniority necessarily makes you an expert in it, and that's the only thing.
No, I'm saying because I've had to function in that role
Yeah.
in other organizations, and I haven't done it for 10 years or 15 years now. So I'd have to brush up. There's been 2 revisions since I last did it, right?
Yeah.
I started with 10, and they're now on 12. So, but that's something I'd like to ask our maybe the city. I think I've seen a copy of 11 here somewhere near the mayor's. But it'd be nice to have a copy in our meeting room and one copy for the chair, especially, and maybe for the vice chair and the parliamentarian, if that gets adopted, to have what's called a brief edition. Some mixture of those would be great.
Yeah, and if I could just say, the member handbook includes a pretty reasonable, concise, abbreviated version of the rules of order. That, in my experience, will cover everything we're going to have to handle.
Well, one of the things that came up in one TTC meeting was somebody wanted to do something, but not right away. And I says, well, you need to postpone it to a time certain and specify the date in your motion. And that's what we did, is we postponed it until after some regional meeting or something like that. So that's where a parliamentarian can really help move things along if he, that person knows what the pattern is and can help, get things moving along without trying to wonder if we're doing the right thing or not. So that's where I think
Okay.
it would help a lot.
Thank you. So were you going to move to table your motion, Troy?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to do that if we're through discussion.
I have one more comment. It might be useful. It might be useful if you could, if there's something that can be drafted in advance, a little bit further in advance, if you could send it to the city attorney.
Well, yeah, I
Okay.
plan on.
Gabriella,
Awesome.
I'm going to take the Fitchburg Library Board of Trustees,
Great.
merge together ideas, and I'd like to, Bill, give it to you to spin by Zimmerman and the city attorney, just to make sure we cover our bases there, having learned my lesson. I like to get the holy water from,
Well,
from the powers that be before we do this again.
okay.
So that's your role, as I read the role of the chair, is to interface with the staff on this very type of issue. So I'll discuss with that of you offline. There's only two of us, so that's not a meeting by any means. And then after it'll probably take me 2 or 3 weekends to do that, and then in time for the next meeting. And then if you could run that by the Zimmerman and the city attorney, I'd appreciate it.
No, we're not gonna do it that way. You need to propose what you want to propose. And that will go into the minute as your proposal.
Okay,
We can get staff comment at the next meeting.
oh,
But
okay, sure.
There's not gonna be a process where you sort of iron out the kinks and have a conversation leading up to that.
Okay, that's fine.
So the way to do is for you to redraft to language that you want. That will go in the agenda for next time, and then we'll deal with it at the meeting.
Okay, sounds good. I'll do it.
My suggestion then is that Troy withdraw his motion. As the maker of the motion, he can withdraw it instead of tabling it. Because if we table it, we'll have to vote to take it off the table
true.
and have to amend that motion to match what he wants for it to say. So I think it's better if the motion is just completely withdrawn. And then Troy, you are free to craft anything you want and propose it at a future meeting.
That's good.
Okay.
If we're through with the discussion, then I'll move to withdraw my amendment.
Okay. So the
My
author
motion.
is withdrawn his motion. The person that made the motion hasn't withdrawn it, though. Mike, are you comfortable to withdraw that motion? Okay, thank you. So then at the next meeting, we'll be talking more about a somewhat different proposal. But having said that, I want to encourage you, Troy, to take a good close look at what it says already in the member handbook and in the city code of ordinances, and focus on what is missing in either of those, and shape your proposal as amendments for those documents,
Okay,
just to avoid confusion, to minimize misunderstanding, to be sure that you're not gonna restating something that's there. I think that's the framework we want to work from, is the existing code of ordinances and the member handbook.
yeah, sounds good. I'll do it that way. I'll take the Board of Public Trustees stuff and chop out the redundant stuff that they've added.
Thank you. And Jason, I think everybody else has that member handbook from me. I will be sure to send you a copy.
I believe Gabriella sent it to me, so I've got it.
Oh,
now.
she did. Okay. All right. Moving on, announcements. One of my announcement that I was going to make was going to be that I will put an agenda item to elect a vice chair next time. So you can look for that. That's an announcement. The second announcement I was going to make has to do with this regional transportation plan, which again, I attempted to send everybody some word about that. Is that one that also went into Hogmill and you didn't get it, Jason? Or did you see that? I'll just mention.
I see it now.
Okay, there is a process just being undertaken to create a regional transportation plan. And the first, there's on June 17th, there's a webinar hosted by the Greater Madison MPO and the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, which they're going to discuss, sort of introduce, I think, where they're going. And then a week later, there's another public meeting, Connect Greater Madison Regional Transportation Plan. So those are two opportunities that at least I will be attending to get in touch with what they're doing. And I would say that it's highly appropriate for this commission to be aware of that, to comment on it, to put forward thoughts that we may have about that as it unfolds. But it's very early days, and the thing is to get involved. Now, Gabriella, you said that you are involved in that somehow already. Could you repeat that, where you are with that?
Yes. Yeah, I was appointed to the specific name of the part I'm appointed to is the Madison Beltline Planning and Environmental Linkages Policy Advisory Committee. There's also a technical advisory committee, and I know Bill Balke and Andrew McFadden are part of that as well. So I believe this effort is part of that larger regional planning process, but this is more specifically focused on the Beltline.
Okay, so again, restate the title of your subgroup.
Sure thing.
Is it an acronym?
There is an acronym, but I don't think it's any better. It's the Madison Beltline Planning and Environmental Linkages Policy Advisory Committee.
All right.
So I can, I know, right? So we just had our initial meeting, and what I can actually do is I can send out the slides from that meeting. What it did was it gave a kind of a summary of what has been done in the past and what we're looking at towards the future. So no decisions were made. It was just kind of an introductory meeting. And there will be public input that, and I do believe it's kind of all part of this regional transportation planning. This is just kind of a smaller subset of it. So I am happy to share that information and let you know when things are coming. But I do think possibly we should think about having a discussion item on a future agenda where possibly Andrew and I could talk about what's happened in the meetings and maybe share some images.
To talk about the general plan process, the regional plan, or to talk about your committees?
Specifically the environmental linkages, the planning and environmental linkages committees that we're on in relation to the Beltline. So.
Okay, well, I don't know if any of you guys are gonna attend either of these meetings that I mentioned on later in June, but I will, and or at least I plan to. So I think we'll have an agenda item to review what's going on there.
I want to. I've got a possible conflict, so I'm waiting to see if that gets resolved. But could we then just, as a follow-up, have reports back to this commission on both from Gabriella and maybe you?
I couldn't get what you were saying, Rich. Was it a question for me?
What I'd like to have is just a follow-up, regularly update from regarding the progress these groups are making or working on.
Okay.
Yeah, and if Bill could do the technical stuff a little bit in his presentations, that would help too.
Okay. All right. All right, that concludes anything I have as far as announcements. Did anybody else have any announcements?
Do we have a date set for the next meeting? I didn't see it in the agenda.
According to the member handbook, we have meetings on the second Tuesday of the month. So whatever date that is. Second Thursday, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, second Thursday of the month. Second
July
Thursday. Does anybody know what date that is? Can anybody tell me what that date is?
July 8th.
July 8th, okay. So July 8th would be our next scheduled meeting. We'll come back and talk about that transportation plan. We'll talk about Troy's revised proposal. Is there anything, and we'll talk about electing a vice chair. We will talk about since there's interest in should we have a parliamentarian, we can talk about that. And see where that goes. That can be a discussion topic.
I'm good.
Any other thoughts for the day before we adjourn?
I got a quick question, and maybe this is an Andrew question, but did the Common Council approve a cross-section, a typical cross-section for
Lacey Road.
Lacey Road?
Yes, I can speak to that if you'd like.
If you don't mind.
Bill, is it okay if I jump in? Yes, we approved it. It was very similar to what so it was approved as amended. The amendment removed the grading for the sidewalk on the south side, but kept the grading for the 7-foot terrace where trees would be planted, added 2-foot bike buffers, and clarified that the multi-use path should be 10 feet. So it's a wider cross-section. It's basically, it's very similar to what was amended at TTC to add those buffered bike lanes. That's the key part of it. So,
So if, a point I wanted to make, and actually it slipped my mind, but I wanted to mention, in the Code of Ordinances, it talks about our role in plan development, comprehensive plan development, bike and ped plan, which is part of the comprehensive plan and so on. And we are guided by those things. And one of the arguments that came out at council was that, in fact, or at least arguably, and I think pretty plainly, the bike and ped plan calls for the cross section that was originally introduced, not the one that was amended and brought to us to look at, but the one that had the buffer, 2-foot buffers and the wider things. So I think it's good to, in the future, to keep in mind that we're bound by those plans. Those are plans made by the Common Council through a process. And if we would want to recommend something that conflicts with those plans, that I think, I'm not sure that we should do that. We might want to recommend changing those plans, but I wouldn't want to, at some future date, be approving something that contradicts those plans, if we know that.
I kind of agree with you. I think that's the province of the Common Council to do, to change city policy, and I think you're right. I think we should follow city policy if it's on that type of issue especially.
The comprehensive plan was just approved in the last year or two, and they changed that, so now I think we can change it twice in 10 years, whereas before it was just once. But there is a whole section on transportation in there.
Yes.
If anybody's
And
interested.
if we're also kind of being responsible, it's not only this board, but it's also Public Works that should be saying sometimes to the council that their bike and ped plan may not necessarily be the best for a specific corridor as it's being reviewed by different advisory groups, by TTC and by Public Works. The council will do whatever they want to, for better or for worse. But if there's certain things that this group, Public Works, any sort of other advisory groups would like to see, this is actually an excellent forum to start to look at deviations from those basic plans, let council know what recommendations there are, and let them sort out what the priorities of the city should be.
Okay.
I agree, and historically, we have done that. I remember many years ago, I think it was Monticello was going to be redone, and they wanted to put in the sidewalks and everything, and it was the Transportation Commission that suggested that they not follow the plan because it's one of the widest roads in town or in the suburban areas. So for that reason, but it came from us instead of anybody else.
Well,
The not having the solid bridge over for the first bike path across PD, that was a suggestion from TTC that went into the council and they adopted it, along with a 10-foot a path on each side. That originated in the TTC as well. And, no bike lanes in that section because of it's an interchange anyway. So I think we do make valuable contributions on very important topics by making suggestions that deviate from what the council originally proposed.
okay. Those are good comments. Thank you. So I have nothing else to talk about right now, and I'm hearing no other people speaking up. I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I just want clarification. So that we're done then with the East Lacey Road. That's all approved. Right.
West Lacey Road, right?
I'm sorry. West Lacey Road.
So That section of road, yes, the intersection has not been, the design of the intersection has not been landed on, the Seminole and Lacey intersection.
Thank you.
So it's all set now for the city to negotiate an actual final design, which then
Yes.
goes to the council for final approval?
Yes, yeah, there are more steps in the process, but it's moving forward in design now.
And I believe that the other thing for this body is that to start thinking about too, I know Andrew is now starting to put together information about the intersection of Seminole and Lacey. So as we meet, I'm sure that'll be on future agendas.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Michael, thank you for your thought that this is all recorded and so somebody can take minutes at some point. And I hope it's not me, but we'll see what comes. We'll see what comes out. So thank you anyway. I need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Ladies, all those in favor?
I.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.